Chapter 1. The art of negotiation is learned through constant practice. When Chris Voss entered the office of Robert Mnookin of the Harvard Negotiation Research Project, he didn't know he was being put to the test, and when he got to know, he was barely prepared. Mnookin and another Harvard professor, Gabriella Bloom, had decided to role-play as negotiators who had kidnapped Chris's son, and they demanded that he pay $1 million or his son dies. Chris wasn't prepared, but he was focused. Knowing he had little time to think extensively, he asked his negotiators how he was supposed to produce such an amount, and how he's not sure if his son was still alive. It was a simple tactic, but it succeeded in throwing his negotiators off balance. By asking the same question repeatedly in a different manner, his negotiators were getting frustrated, and Chris knew it was only a matter of time before they gave up. Negotiation requires tactics that can only be understood through constant practice. One of the tactics is learning. Learning in this form requires studying the negotiator and knowing what he wants, why he wants it, when he wants it, and how he wants it. It's in knowing how he will react, his patience, his temperament, and his weakness. In one of her classes on negotiation, instructor Sheila Heen divided her students into pairs and gave them a task. One person was selling a product, the other person was buying a product, and they both were given different price limits. Chris was paired with a guy named Andy, and together they both carried out the instruction. At the next class, when the instructor asked how much Chris received for the deal, she discovered that he had collected almost everything Andy had. This was a surprise to the whole class. Chris had learned that by frustrating Andy a little, he could trick him into believing that he had made a good deal. This is the same with almost everybody. Keep in mind, the art of negotiation lies in the belief that humans want to be assured that they are being understood and listened to. When you listen, the other party believes that you care enough, that whatever they are saying matters to you, and that you are willing to hear them out. Chapter 2. Becoming an effective negotiator requires mastering certain techniques. Negotiation requires expertise, but most of all, it requires a special set of techniques. In line with these techniques, it is essential to know that assumptions hardly yield good results for any negotiation. Don't put yourself in a position where the other party feels like they don't have to tell you anything, since you appear to know it all. The purpose of a negotiation is to reach a conclusion that's as safe and agreeable as possible. Assumption blinds ideas, and it's a massive deal breaker for any negotiation. Instead of assumptions, you are advised to go for the hypothesis. Examine the variables and check out all the possible outcomes. Don't be overconfident and unnecessarily bossy. Consider this. Questioning assumptions and examining all potential outcomes makes it very easy to deal with surprises. Knowing the correct techniques to use is the right step forward that can guarantee positive results. Several techniques can be employed for negotiations, but the best methods are: calm yourself. Humans are easily distracted, and there's a limit to the number of thoughts the brain and mind can process at once. According to George A. Miller, a psychologist, humans can only handle about 7 pieces of information in our conscious mind. Remember this: a negotiation is not a battle of arguments. You only need as much information as possible. Going into a negotiation with the thought of engaging in an argument can take your mind off vital information. Control your mind to focus on the information and task at hand. One of the biggest mistakes a negotiator can make is going too fast or being impatient. The other person automatically feels that you don't care about his position and that you might not be true to your word. Remember, slowing down the process creates a calm environment that allows a rapport to thrive. When you take it bit by bit, the other party starts to feel interested because he knows you care about what he has to say. Your voice is also critical in negotiations. The other party can easily read your mood through your voice, the same way you can read theirs. Don't let frustration tell in your voice. Employ one of the voice tactics that's called the late-night FM DJ voice. This voice, when inflected in a downward way, passes a message to the other guy that you've got it under control. In a situation where a criminal wants to surrender, he needs reassurance that when he steps out, he won't be gunned down by the cops. There are different types of voice tactics, though. There's the late-night FM DJ voice, the playful positive voice, and the direct assertive voice. Did you know? Mirroring or isopraxism, imitating someone in a way that achieves mutual comfort, can be done using speech patterns, tone of voice, body language, and the likes. This technique works well in extracting information because by mirroring, the other party's neurological sense unconsciously creates a bond with yours, and they start giving out helpful information. Chapter 3. Finding out the problems and labeling them helps to win a negotiation. Going ahead into a negotiation without trying to examine the whole situation from the other party's point of view is not an excellent way to start any negotiation. A great negotiator should be ready to understand the situation through the eyes of the other party. This helps to understand the emotions of the other party. When Chris was called to handle a situation where some gang members had been holed up in an apartment in Harlem, his primary tactic was to identify the gang's problem and then label it. Instead of ignoring their emotions, he embraced it and used it as a tactical weapon. He knew that these people were scared, and they knew they had little chance of escaping if it came to a gun battle. Knowing this, Chris negotiated with them by employing two tactics: tactical empathy and labeling. Note this: tactical empathy is knowing what's going on in the mind of the other party. It is about knowing their mental state, their feelings, as well as their emotional state, and using it to start a negotiation with them. When you observe the tone of their voice, their demeanor, their facial expressions or unconscious gestures, your brain starts to align with theirs, and you begin to see from their view. This information is the tool you need in appealing to their rational sense. Labeling, on the other hand, is a smart way of understanding someone's emotion by acknowledging it. This is better done when you highlight the other party's emotional state. You have to listen, recognize, and examine the possible outcome of the emotions in a situation. Labeling works exceptionally when the other person is tense and uncomfortable. When you resonate with their fears and let them know that you understand their situation, they tend to calm down and allow you to navigate the safest conclusion to the negotiation. Labels usually begin with these phrases: "It seems like," "It looks like," "It sounds like." Labeling is an effective way to understand someone's emotions. Labels work with phrases like, "It looks like," or "It sounds like." A great way to label is to diffuse the negatives and then reinforce the positives. Assess the negatives, draw out as many possibilities as possible from it, then use the negatives to find positives. When going into a negotiation, examine all the possible outcomes, both positive and negative. These predictions can help you determine the best way to approach negotiation. Keep in mind, determine all possible outcomes of negotiations to follow the one you'll find acceptable. Chapter 4. An expert negotiator knows the true meanings of yes and no, and he doesn't always seek a yes. A key point: a conviction that yes means positivity and no means negativity is a wrong mentality for effective negotiation. Pushing your counterpart toward giving you yes answers would only scare them and frustrate them because they believe you are rushing them and not taking time to understand them. In fact, in negotiation, the best answer you can hope for is a no. Key point: no is the start of a negotiation, not the end. No allows sieving what's useful and what is not. When the other party tells you no, then you are automatically generating a list of things that you don't want in the negotiation. It is a way of eliminating unnecessary elements from the necessary things. No can mean a lot of things, some of which are, "I am not interested," "You make me feel uncomfortable," "I don't really understand," "It's beyond my financial capabilities." And there are three kinds of yes. Counterfeit. This is a disguised no. It happens when your counterpart is forced to say yes while he means no. Confirmation. This is a regular yes to regular questions. It is the kind of yes attached to simple questions that don't require the other party to lie. Commitment. This is the type of yes that comes after an agreement. It is like a binding of a contract. This kind of yes is more like a signature at the end of a discussion that shows that both parties agree to specific terms and conditions. There are a lot of things no can achieve that are alien to a lot of negotiators. Some of them are: no helps us emphasize the real issue. No gives people protection from making bad and incorrect decisions. No allows people to reflect on their choices. No gives a sense of confidence and self-assurance to someone when it comes to controlling feelings and emotions. No gives impetus to a negotiation. Chapter 5. Learning the power of persuasion and fairness can make a negotiation go your way. One of the most significant ways to solve a negotiation is by persuasion. Persuasion is an act of negotiation in a more profound sense. To be able to go through a negotiation and come back with a successful outcome, you need the power of persuasion. And this power is connected with the admittance of two powerful words: that's right. As a negotiator, it is believed that once you've gotten to the stage where the other party tells you, that's right, then you have taken control of the situation by letting the other party admit that your assertions are right. At this stage, you would have eliminated some possibilities that have been rendered not useful by that statement. To establish a conversation that would yield, that's right, you must be able to assemble a summary of the situation. This summary must include the label, mirror, effective pauses, tactical empathy, and a lot of techniques mentioned above. Getting to "that's right" is better than getting to a "yes." Also, you need to understand that nothing is fair. To the other party, fairness only comes into play when he's satisfied. To you, fairness comes into play when you're satisfied. So how do you reach an agreement with the other side? Anchor their emotions by analyzing the whole situation and giving them the worst possible scenario. Play the audit accusation card and make them fear the worst if they don't accept your side of the bargain. Let the other guy go first. As much as possible, let the other guy kickstart the offer. Let your counterpart go first to counteroffer as suitable. But be careful, because a very good counterpart can use that to tweak your level of fairness. If at all you're willing to go first, establish a range by using past experiences and present knowledge as reference points. That gets your message across without making the other party all defensive against your offer. You can make your offer seem very reasonable to them by offering things that are important to them but not important to you. Here's a tip. Use odd numbers to create an illusion to the other party that you've done a calculation and that you're offering a number that's in their best interests. Surprise them with gifts too. Giving the other party an unrelated gift or offer has a high chance of yielding the right results. It tricks them into believing that you care about them, and subconsciously they are willing to pay you back for the gift sooner or later. Chapter 6. Control the negotiation without making it obvious. Dos Palmas private diving resort had a situation where a dangerous Islamist radical group that belonged to the Abu Sayyaf held 20 people hostage. A day after these kidnappings, the newly elected Philippine president, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, declared an all-out war against this group. They were attacked in a series of failed attempts, and due to these attacks, the radicals got angry, raped, and killed a lot of their hostages. The Philippine government thought they had control. They felt they could take over the situation by going on the offensive, but they ended up suffering terrible losses. It was at this point the FBI went back to the table and came up with more tactics on how to tackle such situations. Keep in mind, always try as much as possible to avoid negotiation during a crossfire. At this point, the other guys have seen everyone from your camp as enemies who want to kill them. They might even decide to take you hostage or execute you to make a point. Avoid a showdown and a clash of pride. When the negotiator and the other party are at loggerheads on whose requests should matter most, without paying attention to the situation of the hostage, it becomes a disaster. A quote: "Our job as persuaders is easier than we think. It is not to get others believing what we say. It's just to stop them unbelieving. Once we achieve that, the game is half won." Chris Voss. Suspend their unbelief by calibrating your questions. Please note, calibrated questions yield outstanding results. Regular questions or requests tend to put you in a situation where you'll have to owe the other side. When you calibrate your questions instead, you are making a request, but at the same time, you're creating an illusion for the other party that they are in control. You can suspend their unbelief by asking questions that would require them to explain themselves, rather than give yes or no answers. Some of the calibrated questions you can use are: what about this is essential to you? How can I make this better for us? How would you like me to proceed? Chapter 7. Overseeing a plan or situation is not enough. You must make sure it is executed to fruition. During a situation in St. Martin Parish in Louisiana, where prisoners held a warden and some staff hostage with makeshift knives, the FBI devised a plan. The inmates knew that they were backed in a corner, so they were ready to surrender. But they were scared of being severely beaten by the law enforcement who had laid a siege at the prison. To defuse the whole situation, the FBI sent a walkie-talkie in and convinced the inmates to send a representative. This representative would walk out without harm and be taken to jail under proper surveillance. When he got there, he would call in and explain to the other inmates that he wasn't beaten or poorly treated. The inmates agreed and sent out a guy. As the guy passed by the third gate, one of the men attached to the SWAT spotted the walkie-talkie with him and collected it. This threatened to spike the whole arrangement until the FBI noticed and quickly sent the walkie-talkie back to the guy to call his other inmates and reassure them. A point to note: knowing the other party's body language, tone of voice, and body gestures is essential to executing a plan. To further explain this, some tools would guide you and better explain how. The 7-28-55% rule. According to UCLA psychologist Professor Albert Mehrabian, only 7% of a message is based on voice, while 38% comes from the tone of voice, and the remaining 55% comes from the speaker's face and body language. In other words, pay adequate attention to the other party's body language, tone, and gestures, and try to see if they match their statements. This is an effective way to discern between lies and truths. The Rule of Three. This is a tactic employed that makes the other party agree to a particular thing thrice subconsciously. It is an efficient method that allows you to discover if a yes is counterfeit, a confirmation, or a commitment. When the other party subconsciously agrees to the same thing thrice, then there's a considerable chance that they are telling the truth. The Pinocchio effect. It is a theory brought up by Deepak Malhotra and a few other professors from Harvard. This theory explains that liars tend to use more words than someone telling the truth, and they also tend to use more third-person pronouns to shift the truth away from them as much as possible. Chris discount. This is simply using your name to form a friendly atmosphere. This is a tactic that works wonders even in a tense situation. Use your name to start discussions, and your counterpart would likely go soft and be willing to interact. Chapter 8. Knowing the type of negotiator you're dealing with will help you get your price. When you are starting to experience a pull that you're being forced into a bargain that doesn't suit you, you can switch the bargain from monetary issues to a different conversation that is in line with your end of the bargain. Ask questions like, what else would you be able to offer to make that a good price for me? That forces your counterpart into a rethink, and his mind automatically starts trying to program a bargain that would suit both of you. As soon as things start to get tough, it is important to know the type of negotiators you would be dealing with. Remember this: there are different kinds of negotiators: the analyst, the accommodator, and the assertive. Knowing the type of negotiator you are dealing with will go a long way to help you achieve your bargaining end. Asking your counterparts questions like, "Why would I want to do business with you?" or "Why do you think I should do that?" is a method that makes the other party explain your position better for you. Also, the inclusion of "I" is a great way to establish a boundary without seeming offensive or confrontational. The Ackerman model is a systemized process that is used for offer-counteroffer situations. There are easy-to-remember steps as listed by the founder, Mike Ackerman. Set your target price, your goal. Set your first offer at 65% of your target price. Calculate 3 raises of decreasing increments to 85, 95, and 100%. Use lots of empathy and different ways of saying no to get the other side to counter before you increase your offer. When calculating the final amounts, use precise, non-round numbers, like, say, $37,893 rather than $38,000. It gives the number of credibility and weight. On your final number, throw in a non-monetary item that they probably don't want to show you're at your limit. Chapter 9. Always be prepared for the black swan. Black swans are the kind of situation that seems hugely out of the question because the human mind judges a present using the experience of the past. Not every counterpart has a demand. The ratio might be few or rare, but it's still there. As a negotiator, you must be prepared for the black swan at all times. Black swans are the unknown possibilities that look like it might never happen but can happen. There are 3 types of leverages to help you uncover the black swan. Positive leverage. This is when you have the power to withhold or provide what the other party requests. Negative leverage. This is when you can make the counterpart go through distress. Normative leverage. This is when you look at the other party's position and use it to your advantage. Always remember, take your time to review the other party's information and use it to settle the whole situation. Discover your stance and their stance, and find a way to make the bargain work in your favor. Mostly, try as much as possible not to disregard any information. Conclusion. Negotiations are tough and are quite unpredictable. If you are not careful enough, you'll always feel like you're failing, unless you grasp the patterns and follow some laid-down tactics. Human beings are different, which means situations automatically differ too. You can never be too sure of an outcome, and that's why this book is recommended across the world for people involved in investigations and negotiations. Try this. Try as much as possible to follow described patterns. Experiment with what you have learned without fear, and confidently apply personal instincts where needed.